Hi team, welcome back to our Introduction to Chinese History Anchor Fact series of printables and mini lessons. In this series, we will learn about some of the most important events that explain the long story of China, the most ancient of today's cultures, to show how China became so important in the world today. In our first lesson, we focused on how important China has become since the Made in China revolution began in 1978, when Deng Xiaoping said, "To get rich is glorious." Today, we will focus on how ancient China is, but also how important the most ancient aspects of Chinese history are to understanding today's China. We will begin with a difficult question to answer. How old is China? The answer is so old that we don't really know. Historians have had a lot of trouble figuring out how early Chinese history begins. As we go further and further back into the past, our information becomes less specific and less reliable. The people of the ancient past were just not very concerned with keeping records and recording history. Still, the Chinese people themselves think of Chinese history as stretching back to the time of the Xia dynasty, which means the time when the Xia family became the rulers of China for many generations, followed by the Shang and the Zhou dynasties. The beginning of the Xia dynasty happened in a very unusual way. The emperor of China at the time, which was about 2200 BC, was named Shun. Under him was a minister named Yu, who showed that he had the good of the people in mind when he personally worked on projects to control the flooding of the Yellow River. As we saw in our Ancient Egypt Anchor Fact series, the Nile River flooded every year during the rainy season in Africa. Americans who live along the Mississippi know that that happens in America too, and that the Army Corps of Engineers has the job of helping to deal with that problem. New Orleans, for instance, has huge levees along the river to prevent the water from flooding the city when it rises. Yu did such a good work on this type of project that Shun chose him to be the next emperor. The interesting thing is that Yu was not Shun's son. Normally, as you probably know, a king passes the throne to his oldest son. This is the pattern we see in most countries. But in China, it did not have to work that way. Shun chose Yu because he knew that Yu would be a good king. This is the first historical example of an idea that has a lot of power in Chinese culture. That idea is benevolent despotism. Let's take a closer look at it. Benevolent means having good intentions. It comes from the Latin word bene, which means good. A despot, however, is a ruler with absolute power. In other words, total control. The problem is captured by a famous phrase: power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If someone has a lot of power, they simply can't avoid being corrupt. They don't have to be nice. They can always just force people to do what they want. But the Chinese people believe that benevolent despotism is the best we can do. They don't believe in democracy or individual rights. They believe that powerful rulers must be in charge of a country and that they must control the people, not leave them alone to pursue their own happiness. And when Shun chose Yu, he was doing that, hoping that at least a good person would be in charge. This has had a lasting impact on China, all the way until the present. When Deng Xiaoping said, "To get rich is glorious," he was being a benevolent despot. He was trying to use his power for good. He was not saying that the Chinese people should be free. He was saying that the rulers should allow them to make and trade things, because it would be good for China. Where did he get this idea? Now we know. He and all the Chinese people look back to Shun and Yu. When Shun chose Yu to be the next benevolent despot, he and all the Chinese people look back to Shun and Yu. In our next lesson, we'll explore how the most famous person in all of Chinese history tried to help the benevolent despots stay benevolent. Next time, Confucius. See you then.